Hi everyone. We're going to deal with costing now. Alicia's will be showing and explaining to you exactly how to do the practical side of it. I'm just going to give you an introduction as to what costing is, especially in the publishing specific context. But as we all know, it's all about the money. At the end of the day, we are running this. Right, so costing a title is like drawing up a budget. Now, if you think of yourselves, I don't know if you are that responsible and already have, your monthly budget that you work out and you know exactly these are my expenses, that this is what is left, if any, for spending money or, your discretionary income. But you need to think of, you cost each individual title individually on its own. And then how it usually works in publishing companies is that they also have a budget for that specific section. So say, for example, editing, marketing, commissioning, they will all have their separate budgets, and all of these budgets are then combined by the finance manager to basically administer and manage all these different accounts for the different departments. But like in commissioning, you will basically have to do a costing for each and every title as well. Okay, so costing a title, as we said, is drawing up a budget. It's basically an estimate of what it will cost to create the book. I'm saying estimate because as you go along and you realize that this book may need more intensive editing, it will cost you more. So your price or not your price, your spending on that specific element would increase. Yes, so but an estimate at least gives the financial people in charge, as well as your department yourself, just an idea of, what can you work, what are the parameters as to where you can work with this title, how much can you save, how much can you add, etc., etc. You also have to assess how much funds are actually available. Now, your finance, I keep on want to say finance minister, but your finance manager needs to tell you this is more or less what you've got as well. That's why I'm saying, they have predetermined budgets worked out per department as well. So what happens sometimes, if you'll have one book that needs a little bit more investment than another book, and you can cross subsidize publications, or the one can basically subsidize the bestseller can subsidize one of the other titles that are not doing that well. You always need to include a contingency. I think it's just important, even if you add it afterwards, after you've done your basic template with Alicia's, it's very important to always think about that contingency. Now, contingency is basically a little bit of a buffer or an extra percentage of your expenses or your projected estimate, just in case something goes wrong. Now, sometimes you don't yourself have to do it in your costing, because your financial person would have possibly already done it for your department. So it could be that your financial person has already worked in an X percentage of a contingency fund for each department in case anything should go wrong. So that's why I'm always saying you need to make friends with the financial people. All right, so costing also helps you determine whether you should proceed or not proceed with a book. As I mentioned in our discussion as well online, is that sometimes your market, after you've conducted market research and you've done your costing, you realize that your book may not actually be as viable as you thought initially. Because after doing, all the costing, you may see, that reevaluate, will I still be able to do a coffee table book, or would I rather then go, for a soft cover, etc., etc. So when will you not proceed? Okay, so when you've done your costing and you've decided, okay, I'm definitely not going to proceed. It may be that the product is just too expensive to produce, and it's a niche product. You know that you maybe only have 500 people who are going to buy it, and it's not even guaranteed. And in order to, satisfy that need for 500 people, but your cost price of your book is maybe a little bit too high, that may sometimes be why you choose not to proceed. or the price ceiling is then too high for your target market. So you work on the calculations, you play around, you manipulate the numbers just to get to a great profit margin and a good selling price. But sometimes it doesn't work out, and what happens is then people keep on hiking the selling price. But what they don't realize is you cannot overprice a product in the market as well. You are going to lose out if your product is maybe aimed at the correct target audience, but the pricing is not aimed accordingly. You can also turn it down if it doesn't make a large or a big enough profit. I must go back to the notes and check, but I think it's 35% is a healthy profit margin for a normal traditional publisher. I don't know whether that has changed. Also, companies, we are providing you with the general details and notes on costing, but obviously within each company they have their own operational procedures or standard operating procedures. They have their own margins that they say a book cannot make less than 60% or 45%, but we're just giving you averages. It's just important that you guys have knowledge about how these things work. It's important that you note the definitions as well. The first two may seem very confusing, but expenses are all costs incurred during the production of a product for a product for sale. But cost then, if you have to then define what cost is basically anything to do with the making of the book. All right, so what kind of costs go into making a book would then at the end of the day be your expense on that book. A price, obviously, what your book will sell for. We always refer to it as the RRP, the recommended retail price. Because once you've done your calculations and you've added your discounts from your bookstores, etc., you end up with a recommended retail selling price. But it could be that a bookstore can mark it up even more. That is at their own discretion, basically. Contingency, what I just mentioned previously, is an amount you plan to cover expenses you did not foresee. So contingency, as I explained, is something that is acting as a kind of a buffer. You put in a little bit extra meat in your accounting so that if something should go wrong or you go over budget, it's been taken care of. There has been provision made for something like that. Because believe me, whenever you start working on a book, it's like building. There are always, or doing construction at your home, always extra costs that you're not firstly aware of or originally aware of, or stuff happens and you now have to add more costs to your book, which makes it more expensive. All right, so influencing factors, definitely price. As I said, the recommended retail selling price is very important. So that is the price that the book will be sold to customers for. So if your book is, maybe your cost price is 90 Rand, but once you've worked out all of the discounts and stuff, you can get it to a selling price of 200 Rand, for example. But your price is a very important factor when it comes to costing. Because as I mentioned today as well in our online session, is that pricing can definitely be a strategy that differentiates your publishing house from others. There are very competitive pricing. Obviously, I'm a bargain hunter as well. So if I want a book, I'll go to Bargain Books. But I'll check it online. I'll check on Loot, I'll check on Takealot, Bargain Books, Graffiti, wherever, and then I go where the book is, priced at the cheapest price possible. Your price is also influenced by the supply and the demand. If there's a high demand for it, you're going to print a lot and your price may not be as high, whereas if you have a low demand for it, it may be that you can only print a few copies, but then your price may be higher. It can work both ways. It can also be that there is now a high demand. So for example, with the coronavirus and toilet paper, now they hike the prices because they know it's an essential item and people are going crazy and everyone wants toilet paper, so it may hike the price. Another thing that can influence your price is when it's a novelty product. As I explained before, with children's books, you sometimes have special features or gimmicky things, like there are little sound buttons. So, for example, this book would have to then go and be printed in the Far East, where they actually have the technology to create interesting products like this, multifaceted products. or it's a novelty product in the sense that it's an art book, you know, and it has a beautiful cloth bound cover and it's embossed. All of those things influence the price of the book to make the book as well as sell the book. Positioning. Now we talk about this a lot, but are you positioning your book as a high-end product or a consumer item, or are you positioning your book as a low-cost, entry-level kind of book? As I mentioned it earlier on, I think, where I said a coloring book, and you price it like at 20 or 25 Rand, but it's a coloring book with little short stories in about the picture that they are coloring in for young kids, and it's sold at supermarkets. All right. So you are positioning your product in such a way. Whereas if you go for the coffee table, more sophisticated kind of look and really high quality trimmings, then obviously your price will also indicate that. Your profit targets. Once again, your financial manager or your executive committee or board of directors, whoever is your boss at that stage, who deals with financial matters, would always give you guys profit targets to say, all right, so we've made so much product, but this year we need to grow our profit by 5% or 10%. Therefore, each department needs to add this and this and this, or you have to have a higher priced product so that you can sell less of that product, but the income is going to be higher. But your profit target is really important as well. You as well, if you work specifically as a commissioning editor on a book, you can also decide my basic profit margin for my books is this or that, and you can increase it every year. Think about things like export costs. The example once again of the children's books. Sometimes you need to send it away to have it printed and it has to come back. Or you can do a book here, but you want to export that book to another country, or you did a co-edition and now you want, you said you'll do the printing and you send them their lot of books and you keep yours. But you have to think about these things because all of these things will influence the price and the costing of a book. Your exchange rates, which obviously goes with export costs. If it's between the US and us, what is a dollar worth today? If it's a pound or it's a euro, you have to think about those things. And your marketing strategy as well. As I said previously, that goes together with positioning. Is that actually part of your marketing strategy that you are trying to actually use pricing as a way to position your book or to market your book? Right. Now, what happens when you cost a single title? You have to first look at fixed and variable costs and direct and indirect costs. All right. You will have to determine if the title is also viable. Now we're going to get into what a fixed and a variable cost is, but you will have to determine if the title is viable. Will it be profitable? Yes, once again, your market could have said it's fantastic, it sounds like a fantastic product and I want it. But now that you've worked on the costing, you maybe realize, is it still viable if I only have a market of 500 readers, but the book is going to cost me too much? All of this is upfront investment. Now, this is the thing. People don't always realize how risky is the wrong word, but anyway, we are actually in a high risk business environment because we do invest a lot in the development of a book before it's even printed. So a lot of money just goes into making this book, producing this book, doing market research, etc., etc. And then by the 6 or 9 months or however long it takes, now your book is only on the shelves. Now your book can start making back all that money, but you have to invest up front. And you know, you wouldn't necessarily get an investor or a sponsor for your book or your project if you didn't do your homework or your market research or your costing or your projections. All right, so just remember, we are really working in a high risk environment. And in that sense, what I mean with high risk is a lot of investment up front, not necessarily a return on investment guaranteed, or that return on investment ROI may even be a little bit later than what expected. Right. For the author, obviously, as well. Authors tend to think, oh, well, I'm just, doing this with a publisher and they're taking all my money. But remember, the publisher is the one putting down all that money for production. Now, I'm not talking about self-publishing and different models of publishing. I'm now talking about the traditional model of publishing, whereas an author sends them an unsolicited manuscript, or a manuscript is commissioned by the publishing house, and they then tell the author, okay, great, we will publish your book. What that means usually is that you as a publisher take on all the cost in producing this book, and then when it sells, then only your author will get their royalties, unless they get an advance, which is royalties that is paid upfront.